Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we are going to be diving in to the Aeldari nerfs in the last balanced data slate and reviewing them and seeing what the implications are, what are they, and how we as Eldar players go from here. So we got off pretty light overall. I think it could have been worse. In hindsight, I was a little bit annoyed at first with a lot of the nerfs, but in hindsight, they are not that bad. And I think the game plan doesn't really change. Now, I will say this, the lack of nerfs, specifically to the Ynnari detachment, is going to mean Ynnari dominance for at least the next 3 months. So we're definitely going to see the win rate of Ynnari skyrocket in comparison with the aspect host, which I do believe is one of the factions that got hit the hardest by the nerfs. So let us go ahead and dive right into it and see what these nerfs entail. So we are going to be going over the point changes, errata, and FAQ and balanced data slate. We got nerfed in all 3 areas. And lastly, we're going to be talking about the reasons and implications of the nerfs and what you should do as a player to combat them. And maybe, we'll talk about some changes, possible changes, and things you can alleviate the nerfs with in your lists. So as for the point changes, they were relatively light with one exception. We have Dire Avengers going up 5 points for 5 and 10 points for 10. So by 1 point per model, doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but Dire Avengers were already kind of struggling to find relevance outside of Asurmen. I do believe that this nerf was a simple Asurmen nerf, nerfing the Asurmen tax, so to speak, to make it harder for lists to build, Asurmen up with sustained hits. Fire Dragons got nerfed. We all saw this coming, didn't we? To 110 points or 120 points for 10. Basically, plus 10 points per 5. Striking Scorpions went from 75 points for 5 to 85 points for 5, a huge 10-point increase there, but their 10-man unit remained the same cost, basically just to put a tax on players running a bunch of mini units of Scorpions. And we have a Wave Serpent tax as well. We all know that a lot of people are digging the new Wave Serpent, and that got increased by 10 points as a result. Dark Reapers are up, not in their minimum units, but in their maximum units by 15 points. And this was to prevent people from running multiple units of 10 Dark Reapers out of Wave Serpents. Warhost was a really good detachment for this because basically you could have 2 units of 10 hopping in and out of Wave Serpents every turn. Aspect Host usually carried at least 1 unit of these guys, and Dark Reapers are an insanely good unit. I did predict a nerf on Dark Reapers. I didn't think they were going to nerf the big unit by 15 points and keep the small units the same. I thought it was going to be kind of more of an even balance, but I do understand why they just targeted the 10-man unit and not the 5-mans. So I am a little bit grateful for that. I love 5-man units of Dark Reapers, just kind of going wherever they want, moving across the battlefield, shooting, dealing good damage. They're an all-purpose damage dealing unit, and they were a little bit strong for what they were paying in Aspect Host, as well as Warhost. As for the FAQ and errata, Ynnari units can now hop into transport. So basically, unless it's a Dark Eldar Ynnari unit that says Ynnari in its name, you can transport Aeldari infantry models like normal, right? And this excludes Azurani units. So this means that you can put Fire Dragons in a Wave Serpent, you can put Howling Banshees in a Wave Serpent if you're running Ynnari. No problems there. We all kind of knew that anyway, but some people were arguing that you couldn't have them in your transports, especially at tournaments and things like that. I think it was maybe sometimes ruled that you couldn't do it. Not that Ynnari really needs Aeldari transports like Falcons and Wave Serpents, but it's nice for the community to have access to that if they want to run the detachment. I'm certainly happy. And this is a big one. The next one is something I did not expect because we've never really had it, and that is Corsairs with battle focus. Guys, Corsairs are now fully integrated into the Aeldari Codex. There's no more Corsairs as kind of a separate entity that does not count as a full-blown unit. They now get battle focus. just like the rest of the Aeldari units. This is huge. Now, Corsairs can actually function like other Eldar units. They can become immune to Overwatch. They can consolidate 6. They can move an extra 2 inches, which is really good and really important. And they can also move when enemies fall back from them, which is huge because they have Scout. And there's been a lot of instances where I've used these guys to charge into a small unit, small kind of scouting unit doing objectives and stuff. And, you know, my opponent wants to fall back from them, of course, to preserve that unit for secondaries later in the game. And now you're going to be able to battle focus these guys and move D6+1 or D6+2 in Warhost. And they're actually looking pretty good for the cost. Of course, I'm talking about the Void Reavers here at 60 points, especially with the nerfs that we saw to Striking Scorpions. They are going up to 85 points. Corsair Void Reavers are only 60. And if you compare them with Rangers, they're actually a really good comparison now. Void Reavers being the more aggressive scouting unit, and Rangers being the more defensive infiltrating unit. Both want to score objectives. Corsair Void Reavers, unfortunately, are a little bit more expensive than Rangers, but they do come with a blaster and power weapons, which means they do a lot more damage than Rangers. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there. And of course, Void Reavers also get rerolls against targets on objectives, which is nice. Rangers are probably a better screening unit than these guys. So there's definitely a debate between whether to take Rangers or Corsair Void Reavers now. Whereas before, most people would just take Rangers because they had access to battle focus, they had access to the D6 move, and of course, you know, they were cheaper. Now there's an actual debate to be had, which is really interesting. So I want to hear you guys' thoughts on Void Reavers. I think they're a really good unit. I thought they were good before in certain lists, but now I think they're probably close to being, dare I say, an auto-include in more aggressive Aeldari lists. I can actually see people starting to take these in Aspect Warrior lists. Because the Striking Scorpions at 85 points, even with rerolls 1s to hit, is a little bit pricey for the damage that they can deal. So you may start to see people using slightly different units in their armies. And I can definitely see people cutting Scorpions to save points on the other stuff that got point increases. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments about that. Now, about the Void Scarred, there's still 80 points for 5. You don't get any of the options at a 5-man unit, aside from just having an extra attack over the Void Reavers, but you lose the rerolls and you gain lethal hits and precision. I do not like this unit. I'm just going to say this right now. I don't think the unit is that good as a 5-man. If you upgrade it to a 10-man for 160, the unit becomes much better, but it is still going to probably be less effective than some of the other aspect units out there in general for different detachments. And I think probably I could see this unit being decent in things like, you know, maybe Ynnari with Yvrain, but I just don't see it being more effective than things like Incubi or Howling Banshees. As a combat unit and as a shooting unit, I don't see it being more effective than things like Dark Reapers and Fire Dragons and stuff like that. So let me know what you think about them, though. Honestly, I'm interested to see how they perform now with Battle Focus. Maybe the Battle Focus was what the Void Scarred need to be effective, and I'm just kind of, you know, using my boomer brain to kind of synthesize the unit, and I'm using old information. But let me know what you guys think about the unit now that it has battle focus. I think obviously not being overwatched is a big thing. So the problem with Void Scarred before was that they were just overwatched pretty much every time, right? And you'd lose a good number of the unit right off the bat. And now, since that's not something you really have to worry about too much anymore, with Flitting Shadows, the battle focus maneuver that lets you ignore Overwatch, I think they're potentially a much better unit. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about that. Okay, now this is the other nerf. This was the unfortunate Balanced Data Slate nerf to Asurmen. I had my issues with it at first. I've kind of come to the realization that it's probably fine, though. Once per battle, instead of, you know, getting its normal damage 3, devastating wound, and anti-infantry 3+, like it did before, it is now anti-infantry 5+, which really doesn't help you against that much infantry. However, I have come to the realization that this ability was just simply too OP against the vast majority of tournament armies, especially in Aspect Host. So if you look at how many players were playing Aspect Host, and you look at probably the wider tournament data, it suggested that Asurmen was just too good into too many matchups. And if you look at how many people play Space Marines in tournaments, it's a massive amount, right? It's like 30% of players in competitive play Space Marines. And maybe it's even more than that. That was the last kind of statistic that I saw, was about 30% of players are playing Space Marines in tournaments. And their win rate's pretty good. So Asurmen being able to just say, that unit of Blade Guard deleted, that unit of Centurions deleted, that unit of Terminators deleted, was probably a little bit too much for GW to handle, and they just kind of, thought that he was too good because he was too good into Space Marines. He's really not that good into a lot of other matchups. He's good into things like Tyrannid Warrior spam. He's good into things like, Necrons, if they're running a lot of, I don't know what they're called, those Canoptic Wraiths, which are led by the Canoptic, or Cryptek, I should say. He's good against them because, they're an infantry unit with the Cryptek, by the way. So I could kind of see GW kind of saying, okay, this guy's too strong, right? And nerfing his ability. I don't even think he should have devastating wounds on his profile. I thought they should have replaced dev wounds with -2 AP. That was my suggestion for how to fix him. They went another direction with it. So realistically, I think he's still good. He's still good in Warhost. He's still good in Aspect Host. What he's not so good in is the other detachments, because he doesn't get a lot out of those detachments, right? So, like, I was including him in Seer Council. I don't think he's worth it in Seer Council anymore. I have replaced him in that detachment. There's just better options, like Dark Reapers, for example. And he's not great in other detachments as well. I was including him in a Guardian Battle Host detachment. I don't know if it's worth including him anymore with Dire Avengers. I think Dire Avengers are probably better off with an Autarch in that detachment, because an Autarch gives you, a little bit of variety with what you can use, and gives you a free stratagem, and gives you, kind of some other things like, rerolls on some of your moves and stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't know if he's as good as he was. I think people are still going to take him, but I think it's more of a debate now in the other detachments, whereas in Warhost and Aspect Host, I think he's still going to be taken. Just, he's obviously not as good. Okay, so what are some of the reasons and implications of the nerfs? A lot of people were confused by these nerfs, and it took me a while to really grasp why. But after looking at a lot of the tournament data, I think the nerfs were clearly targeting one thing and one thing only, which was the Aspect Host detachment. And this, these set of nerfs were almost exclusively used for units that were very common in that detachment. So every single nerf, points nerf, was things that people were taking in, duplicate or sometimes triplicate in their list. So Wave Serpents, people were using multiple Wave Serpents. People were using multiple units of Dark Reapers. People were using multiple units of Fire Dragons. And people were using big units of Avengers or small units of Avengers with Asurmen specifically. So all of these things were nerfed because they were using Aspect Host. Because Aspect Host really pushes the envelope on those units to a very powerful level, which I think it should be, because Aspect Host actually does really struggle with primary objectives. They're just really good at killing stuff, right? So GW targeted that for nerfs. And I think the implications of the nerfs are going to be that Aspect Host lists will likely get about 60 points more expensive. On average, a lot of people that I've been talking about are saying their lists are going up by 60 points, sometimes more, and the other detachments are going to probably not go up that much, 20 to 30 points. My, Seer Council list, for example, went up 30 points because it has a Wave Serpent in it, and it had Dire Avengers with Asurmen, and it also had Fire Dragons. So it went up about 30 points approximately. And that's just going to be collateral damage as far as the nerfs go. So that's what's going to happen. Basically, every balanced data slate is something's going to get nerfed, right? And it's going to negatively impact other detachments. That's just how it is. A lot of players are complaining about that because some units are really good in some detachments and they're not so good in others, and things are getting disproportionately nerfed. But I don't think that's that big of a deal because Eldar are pretty strong right now, and I think they're a very good army. As far as Asurmen goes, he's going to become a much more situational pick. He's still good. He's still good in those two detachments, the Aspect Host and War Host, but he's a bit too expensive for the damage in the other detachments. So I would never put him in Seer Council again. I know it seems like, oh my gosh, I'm just throwing him away. But if I was running him in a competitive list, I probably wouldn't take him. He's probably a unit that is the first to go. He's like a nice to have. He's like nice to have. He's really cool. He deals with Terminators really well, but he's not exactly necessary for how you play the list. So I probably wouldn't include him. Of course, if I'm just playing for fun, I'm always going to include him because he's the ass man and he's awesome and I have him painted and I have the new model, so of course. Striking Scorpions, I think they're probably a little bit too expensive to take multiple units of. I don't think you need multiple units of them anyway. And we will have to kind of wait and see, but my thought is that Rangers and Corsair Void Reavers are going to be taken instead. Void Reavers have the battle focus ability now, which makes them very useful in the early game, and Rangers, of course, not only do they have battle focus, but they have a reactive move, which is really good for scoring objectives and keeping them alive against other scouting units. And you can actually position your units in such a way that Rangers can fall back into range of, like, let's say, a unit that's going to heroically intervene if they charge in, or a unit that's going to overwatch something if they get charged. So there's a big possibility going forward that Rangers and Void Reavers are going to be the units that people use more often, which is great. I love Rangers. I love Void Reavers. I'm really glad to see that people are going to use them more now that Striking Scorpions are a little bit nerfed. Of course, I think people will still take Striking Scorpions, but not probably 15 of them or whatever, because they're just a little too expensive for that, and it's definitely not optimal in competitive play. As for Dark Reapers, people are still going to take max units of them. The 15-point tax was just a tax to take them in your list. They're just simply too good of a damage covered unit to disappear from lists. They do everything, right? They kill vehicles. They kill infantry. They kill heavy infantry. They kill light infantry. They kill everything, basically. The only thing that Dark Reapers are bad at doing is killing things that are toughness 11 or 12. And for those targets, you got Fire Dragons. So Dark Reapers are a very good unit, and I think they're central to a lot of lists right now, and they're going to keep appearing. Fire Dragons are going to remain in most lists as well. 10-point increase is not going to stop them from being extremely points efficient into their desired targets. Killing things like vehicles or Wraith Lords or whatever it is going to be very strong. They're going to continue to just waste those types of units very easily. So Fire Dragons are still very good, as is Fuegan. And about the Wave Serpent, some might consider a Falcon instead now that their points are closer together. But the Wave Serpent's still good. It still carries 10 models. It's still more durable than the Falcon, so there is that to consider. And it really comes down to, what do you want more in your list? You want a little bit more firepower and maneuverability because the Wave Serpent is a little bit bigger, and it does lose about an inch when you try to move it, around terrain and stuff like that. Or do you want something that is, has more firepower, which is the Falcon? It's really, do you want more firepower and maneuverability, or do you want more durability and transport capacity? And that's really what it comes down to. So yeah, I think both are good choices still, though, and I think both are going to still be used in competitive lists. Okay, so in conclusion, the Aeldari are in a really strong spot, considering that Slaanesh got huge nerfs. Thank God. A lot of people were having trouble into Slaanesh, and I know why. After reading through and really studying their detachment, it's OP, right? There's a couple of really just bad stratagems in that detachment that just basically can kill off any army. at least at the lower levels of competitive play. And I think at the higher levels of competitive play, there are ways to get around it, but, it's problematic. Let's just put it that way. So they got huge nerfs, and they're totally reworked. And now, as a faction, as a newer codex, we do have a lot of tools to deal with most other factions. I can't think of a single faction that is the counter to Aeldari right now, especially after the guard nerfs too. So guard got huge nerfs. You're not going to see people running 9 mortar teams anymore. That's obsolete. That's out because they're all increased by a good number of points. So you're not going to be seeing that as much. And because of the light nerfs to Ynnari, we've seen almost actually no nerfs to Ynnari outside of like fire dragons maybe. I think Ynnari and Seer Council are going to be super strong going forward, and Ynnari is going to be the most likely to dominate the meta as well. Once people learn how to play it, because there's a lot of people right now running Ynnari that really don't have the best grasp of the faction because they're doing a little bit of meta chasing, right? They're chasing that meta a little bit. They heard Ynnari was great, and they're jumping into it, and they're not really normally Eldar players, some of them. So when you have people that are kind of swapping armies back and forth, and they choose Ynnari, and they're not usually, kind of a main Eldar player, they might have a little bit of a learning curve going into it, and that can translate into tournament play. But once people get a handle of it, which will be soon, because tournament players play a lot of games, they will get a handle of the army, and they will do very well with it. And I think Ynnari is going to be the next best thing, basically. And I do think it's going to have some heavy nerfs, but luckily I don't think GW is silly enough to nerf a lot of the quote-unquote Ynnari units, or units that are good in Ynnari. I think they're just going to realize, okay, these units are fine in other detachments. It's just in this detachment they're OP, so let's nerf the rules and not the points. That's what I'm hoping. But we'll see. GW classically never learns from its mistakes, and when it does good, it doesn't continue doing good. It seems to make the same mistakes again and again and again. It's kind of like, somebody steals something from the store, they get caught, they say, hey, don't do that again, we'll call the police. And then, for a couple months they're good, and they're like, all right, I won't steal. And hey, maybe they even donate to charity. But then, 2 weeks later, they get caught stealing again. It's like, did you not learn your lesson? I mean, was this all a show? Who knows? Was it luck? I don't know. So, yeah, I think GW in a lot of ways is kind of like that sometimes. And they just don't really get the nail on the head with the Eldar a lot of times. But luckily, nerfs weren't too bad. We're still in a great spot. And in fact, I would be actually a lot more critical if I thought the nerfs were killing the faction. It absolutely doesn't. It doesn't kill Aspect Host at all. Now, I will say this. Going into kind of the codex and stuff like that, I really didn't think Aspect Host was going to be the best. And I actually, believe it or not, I still don't think it's the best. I think it has its weaknesses. Now that I've played against Aspect Host, and I've played with Aspect Host, I definitely know that having no fallback and shoot and charge stratagem really sucks. It's really hard to play around it, and if you're, playing competitively, people will lock your units in combat, and that is going to be a huge, detriment to your play. So I personally think Aspect Host is strong, but I think it does have its weaknesses, and I don't think it's OP. I'm just going to say that. I don't think it's an OP detachment. Anybody playing against Aspect Host and you're losing against Aspect Host, if anybody watching this video is like, oh, Eldar is OP, my Land Raider died to 5 Fire Dragons. Yes, your Land Raider can die to 5 Fire Dragons, but they're probably going to lose the Wave Serpent and the Fire Dragons in the Return Punch. So, that's going to be, now it's 125 for a Wave Serpent, 110 for Fire Dragons. It's going to be like 235 points. I think you're fine, right? I think you're okay. And then, of course, anything that they hit you with, they're going to have to hit you so hard that you have nothing left. And if you leave yourself open like that, then you probably deserve to lose. You probably deserve to have all your stuff killed. Anyway, So that's all I got for today. That's all I got for the nerfs. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section about the nerfs. I don't think they're that big of a deal. I know people are going to complain about them, but if you play with the Asurmen, for example, and you use him in aspect host already, you'll see he's still really powerful. He's just not as insane. Before I think it was basically a guarantee that you were going to pick up a Terminator unit. Now, if you don't roll right, you may not pick up the Terminator unit. But overall, I still think he's really good. I think you're just going to have to include his combat profile a little bit. You're going to have to, do some charges, stuff like that with him, because he does have a really good combat profile as well. So you're going to have to use him in a little bit of a more clever way. That's all. All right, guys, that is going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Thank you so much to all my patrons and supporters who have supported the channel over the last 2 years plus. You guys have really improved the channel and helped it grow significantly. If you do want to join the channel and become a Patreon member or a channel member, I will leave the links in the description for that, and that grants you permanent access to our Discord community. Of course, you can always join the Patreon for free with a free trial and get access to the Discord and join us there. So I will also let you guys know as well, and I've posted about this today, there are currently warp spiders, fire dragons, and other new and swooping hawks on Amazon, and I've compiled all those for you guys, and I've put it in my Amazon affiliate link. You just have to go to Eldar Essentials. That is going to be my kind of Amazon affiliate link for anybody wanting to purchase some discounted Eldar minis. So Amazon has all the new discounted Eldar minis. You don't have to go to Amazon and spend $100 on fire dragons, for example. You can get them for around $50, which is a discount. And all you have to do is follow the link, and then it helps me out a little bit too as an Amazon affiliate. So if you want to check that out, that's awesome. Please do if you're looking to get more fire dragons or other aspect warriors. And also, for those of you who are interested in Eldar-inspired apparel, Eldar shirts and hats and beanies and all that stuff, check out my channel store page. I will leave the link in the description for that to pick up some Eldar-inspired apparel. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Next is going to be Ynnari. We're going to be diving into the old OP, the OP faction of the Eldar. So stay tuned for that. All right, guys, peace out. I'll see you guys next time.